Welcome to SOX 2016 Trends and Best Practices. We started this practice or this presentation several years ago because we wanted to share what was happening practically on the ground as we've been working with multiple clients across different Big 4, Big 6 auditors, and we were seeing trends or consistencies, or once in a while we would see certain outliers. And so this is a compilation of those, and every year, at the end of the year or the start of the year, our team gets together and we share with each other, this is what I'm seeing, this is what I'm predicting that our auditors are signaling, and so we want to be very proactive and share it with you as well. And it includes areas of increased focus for the SEC and the PCAOB, because as you remember, the PCAOB regulates the audit firms, and what their guidance will trickle down to the audit firms, which then impacts our clients. And so we want to share it with you because you are our clients. And these are very practical types of tips or things that we're going to share with you. Lots of questions and focus on cybersecurity, so that shouldn't be a surprise. Cybersecurity has been high on everybody's list. I see it tempering down a bit, but we'll talk about some of the questions and issues. There's a lot continued focus on system controls, IT general controls, particularly because many of our clients are implementing new systems, implementing more automation and introducing that into their processes. So more questions around that. More report and spreadsheet testing. Requirements for that getting more detailed, and entity level controls. This was when we did the COSO 2013 mapping in 2013-2014. A lot of questions around that, and now it's just tweaking and refining it. Management review controls, those were issues that were hot 2 years ago, and now it's more of a refinement and more depending on the auditor, specific questions that they're asking. Minimum documentation standards that we're seeing our clients put in place or we're recommending them put in place. And again, the systems, because so much is heavily done through systems and automation now, segregation of duties, looking at the timing of when you're doing your test samples, and you would think we've solved this over the years, but it continues to change with some auditors now requiring certain samples in the fourth quarter, and also not just being a simple inquiry for roll forwards, it's actually having to do additional procedures. The new areas focus on statements of cash flow and related party disclosures. A lot of our auditors started to ask about it in 2015, and I think by 2016, they're going to assume that it's part of your process and it's built into that already. And then lastly, what's our best practice on making sure that we're ahead of this, we're very proactively communicating and anticipating these types of questions. So cybersecurity, system access, and cybersecurity it's very sexy right now, but really it comes down to a lot of there's a bit of social engineering with it as well. But system access, who has privileged account access? And when we say privileged account, it's the system administrator access, it's access to the database, it's the root access to your system itself that the auditors are asking about, and frankly, you should be from a good business practice. Hijacking the wire transfers. This is where the scammers, we did a series on this back in October or so, on how scammers are using email and spear phishing to get companies to wire millions of dollars to fake bank accounts outside of the U.S. And you've seen Ubiquity was hit by this. Zoom in December of 2014 was hit by this, and I think it was 30 million. Ubiquity had about a $40 million hit as well. And many of our clients are seeing the wire transfer frauds in smaller amounts. And it's either it's happened to them or they were able to prevent it at the very last minute. And you can see more, go back to our previous blog on the spear phishing scandal. Number 3, governance and risk management programs. A lot of auditors are asking, how are you actively managing your risk? Do you have some type of risk management program? A lot of the auditors have questionnaires that they essentially are just asking you, have you thought about these things? And our clients have started to put together some of the committees just to talk about it, not necessarily do a full list yet or a full list of procedures yet, but thinking about it is great. Security monitoring incident management programs. That's where it's the proactive approach. And as the security monitoring is, as people are pinging into your servers or your websites, are we getting notifications of those? Is it higher volume, higher traffic than normal? And if there is an incident, do we have, or if an incident were to happen, do we have a program or at least some steps of what are we going to do? You think about this in terms of Target that got hacked. It wasn't that they were hacked because of their computer system. It was getting through their HVAC system. Security awareness program, helping to combat social engineering. And the awareness is more training of saying, of having short programs, short lunch and learn programs about, hey, if you see suspicious activity, whether it's on your computer traffic or people around, notifying IT or facilities and having certain steps in place. You also see, and some of our clients have looked at, threat and vulnerability management programs, proactive discussion of, well, what are the threats that potentially could happen to us? If you are a wind farm, if you're utilities, sometimes it's not actually your own information that the hackers are interested in, it's your client's information that you may have that they want to get access to as a stepping stone to get to your customers. And the patch management system, it seems so simple, but patch management is basically the easy antivirus, making sure some of those things are up to date so that we're not going to be able to stop all of the viruses or the Trojan horses or whatever the latest virus we have going out there. But if you could stop 90% of it, that just reduces the amount of time your IT team has to deal with the routine stuff and take care of the easy system types of items. Some of our clients are also rigorously looking at a vendor risk management system. And this is particularly true for mobile payment, for companies that deal with a lot of mobile payments, and you're basically heavily regulated. And a vendor risk management program is saying, who are you using as your vendor? Are you classifying some vendors that you're using, let's say your data center? They're basically high risk to you because if your data is in the data center, your customer of your business is on the data center and it goes down, or the data center gets hacked, or something happens to it, how will you recover as a business? So some of our clients have started to put together categories for their clients or their vendors and saying, these vendors are top priority for us. Let's make sure we screen, we talk to them often. These are medium priority client vendors, and these are the low risk vendors because it's just manual. Everything is manual. Our business is not dependent on them. But some of our clients have started to put together a risk management program specific to vendors. And then a data classification program, meaning what type of information is important to you and how do you protect it? Again, a couple of our clients who are in heavily regulated or just very sensitive about the client information that they have in terms of all the consumers, millions and millions of consumers. Well, how do we classify some of the data that we're getting? Certain things such as your social security number, your credit card, your private information, identifying information, PII. Well, how do we classify that? We should put that in the high risk bucket. Other types of data we may collect from our clients is less critical. So maybe we don't put as many fences or as many boundaries around that, just because the cost of maintaining such a high security system around everything is too high. So you have to stratify and say, this type of information we're going to protect really well. The others, we put medium security measures around it. And as I mentioned, we are getting increased focus on system controls and IT general controls. We, as in our clients, I always consider myself as part of that. And so auditors, because again of the cybersecurity, now they're looking at system controls and general IT controls. Reviewing controls to make sure that they have accurate descriptions. They're testing to make sure it's operating effectively, or the testing, is it repeatable, is it scalable, is it viable? Ensuring additional testing is performed if necessary. So certain areas where from security, the cybersecurity, some of our clients on their own are putting emphasis on it, and then the auditors are putting actual emphasis on testing more of the system. And if you don't have system controls, are there mitigating controls? Or sometimes your systems are a bit open, but do you have mitigating or compensating controls? Are you monitoring some of that activity maybe to help you identify that? And ensuring that this goes quite a bit around testing of how do we know that the population, the IT population, whether it's the number of systems that we have in scope and how do they impact the financial statements, every year having to refresh that, and also making sure the population, when you're pulling out reports or things that you're relying on, how do you know that the systems are completely and accurately pulling out the data? A lot of our clients are putting in systems, and so increased focus on the completeness of the data migration. It's fairly simple when you have financial statements and you know that we can now tie back to our cash balances, our AR balances, our balance sheet, our P&L, but at the detail, at the transaction level, it's more important because in the future, as you transact against that, or when you do detailed queries to run trends and so forth, it's really important for the data migration. User profile setup. So when you've implemented a new system or you're upgrading, like going from an Oracle 11i to an R12, the user profiles, sometimes they're new functionalities that get included in the upgrade, or as part of a new system implementation, have you thought about the user profiles that you're setting up or that are getting enhanced without your knowledge? There may be new functions added to those user profiles. Segregation of duties, especially when you have a new system implementation. You first start out, everybody has system admin access so that you can get all your information and data migrated in, but then after that, and when things start to plateau and you now know whose roles and who's supposed to do certain activities, are we starting to segregate some of those user profiles to get proper segregation of duties? And then ensure that the SOX processes are in place. When you put in a new system, sometimes that's the best time to put in some of these new controls, but for our clients, often they don't, because they're smaller or fast growth companies, they're saying we don't want the system to be the bottleneck for our growth, because we still have to fuel our growth and our day-to-day operations. We don't want too many controls in there. So there's the balance between what controls can you put in the system and what controls do you manually have outside the system. The other one that we're seeing a lot of this past year is more report and spreadsheet testing. So there's the increased focus, and when we say standard reports, if you're using Oracle, for example, there will be selected reports that, let's say the AR aging or the trial balance. Some of those are easy to get out, but others, if you're using more customized systems, you're connecting data from one system to another, a lot of spreadsheets. So there's been increased focus on the accuracy and the completeness of testing system reports in Excel spreadsheets and making sure that the formulas, you know how easy it is in Excel to just fat finger something, you accidentally delete data in one cell and it cascades throughout the entire spreadsheet, or just that formula, you copy one cell over more than you needed or one cell under, or you haven't added up the entire population. That consistently is where we find issues, is in the Excel spreadsheet testing. And what we're seeing, which was a little more unusual starting last year, was controls over computations done by third parties. So think of paychecks, think of ADP. You've already outsourced your payroll. You have gotten their SSAE 16 to say that you can rely on their controls. Some of the auditors, and we've seen this for EY and we've seen this for PwC, is they're still saying, we'll take a sample transaction and just do a test transaction to make sure that, yes, they have their controls, but can you reasonably get to their total, or how do you know that the total report that you're getting at the end of the pay period, every month, every 2 weeks, that you're using that report accurately to record your journal entries. So we're seeing more of that. And also share-based compensation. That's the equity edge reports. Taking a sample of a calculation and doing it and making sure that your results reasonably match what the system is putting out. And then identifying, here is where the company having to identify a list of manual reports and spreadsheets, and then classifying which ones are key. The challenge we have with this is when you first start out, if you think of on average there are 10 processes in a company for SOX, well, if you use 3 reports, that's 10 times 3, 30 reports. Are all 30 of those reports key? Because now you're having to test 30 reports at least. That's a lot of work. And so our clients have had to really rationalize and say, well, we do use 3 reports in the equity process, but this one report has a combination of 2 or 3 elements to it. So maybe we can eliminate and just select and test this one report. Otherwise, depending on your business complexity, you could have 50 or 60 key reports that you have to test, and that takes time. And then electronic audit evidence, or the information produced by an entity, IPE. Again, this goes to what's the source of the report that is being produced. So if someone hands you, as the auditor, if you hand the auditor your AR aging, the auditor is going to ask, well, how was this information generated? So information produced by the entity is information produced by the client or us as a company. When we generated that AR report, how did we know it was complete and it was accurate? So a lot of emphasis and words thrown around IPs and report testing. You also see an increased level of detail around entity level controls. So you remember in COSO 2013, we did the framework, we mapped it to the 17 points of focus and the principles. Well, in 2015, and now it's died down a bit, but expanding the level of detail around the control language on entity level controls. We've seen the request for that. And so if you haven't refreshed your COSO mapping or looked at some of the report language around entity level controls, you may have to do that in 2016. Management review controls, I think this has been around for 2 or 3 years now, and it's just more the enhanced level of the narratives. I think that's gotten more under more control. But there, again, in management review controls or MRCs, making sure that you have specific dollar thresholds for reviews, or what's your review criteria. I review variances over $5 million and 1% change, or $1 million and 10% change, or some of these criteria the auditors have really started to pick on to say, well, it's met one of them or both of the criteria. Have you really done your detailed review? And our clients are also going through and classifying the management review controls under high, medium, or low based on the complexity and the amount of judgment involved. So what happens is, let's say your review of a bank reconciliation. Typically, we would consider that low complexity, low judgment. The reason is when you're looking at a bank reconciliation, you're able to verify the ending bank balance. You're able to verify the checks that are outstanding either on your system or on the bank side, or the deposits in transit. So there's not a lot of judgment in that. Now, the high management review controls are the ones around, let's say, a reserve, an E&O, excess and obsolete inventory reserve analysis. Well, that takes a lot of knowledge about the industry that you're in, what are the trends in predicting future sales, and the customer behavior. So that would more typically be on the high management review controls. And so auditors are asking our clients to put MRCs into those 3 buckets. And then minimum documentation standards. What we're finding is that, in the old days, 2004 or so, you have to sign off and date, and over time, it got a little lax. We are now, I see the pendulum swinging, and you have to sign off and date whatever it is you're reviewing, so month, day, year. retaining evidence of it, making scribbles or marks on pieces of paper or comments in email. It's no longer acceptable just to respond and say approved. You kind of have to say, I looked at your assumptions. Have you addressed these questions and what was the resolution to that? Marking up the paper a bit. And keeping evidence of the follow-up questions. So if you sent a question off, if you were reviewing the E&O reserve and then you had 3 questions, you sent it off to someone, well, that's great evidence you did your review, but then often the auditors are asking, well, what was the response? Did you follow up on those questions and those answers, and did the answers seem reasonable, and did it change your estimate in some way? We also talked about segregation of duties analysis now. A lot of our clients with new systems and the interplay between one or more systems, validating the system access and the roles and responsibilities, whether you're using a tool. Oracle has this big GRC tool which costs us so much that a lot of our clients are starting to unplug it and not renew. So they're having to find different ways to manually verify it, and we've been able to help them using our ACL, our audit command language, to ACL to help test some of those and build through some of these logics to automate it. Completing the analysis, the SOD, the segregation of duties analysis earlier in the year in the system so that you can identify the gaps and fixing it so that it's not a huge scramble at the end of the year. And then writing a memo or writing some bullet points to summarize what you've done. Because a lot of our clients have proper segregation of duties, have done the analysis, and unfortunately you do it as part of the practice of doing it, but then we don't write it on a piece of paper sometime. And so when the auditors come back and say, well, did you do it? What did you consider? We forget about it. And so it's easier to do it right then in the process of doing the analysis to write the memo. This is the timing of test samples. So historically, there have been a lot of the auditors tend to test late in Q3 and 4, and now they want to get more samples throughout the first 3 quarters, so Q1, Q2, and Q3. And so some of our work has really focused on that. And recently, one of the audit firms have also said, and it just impacted our clients here, is Q4, they still need a handful of samples in Q4, particularly for high-risk controls. Even if you've got samples in Q1, 2, and 3, you have to have samples in Q4 and the reperformance of some of those samples. So in the past, maybe you've gotten all of your samples, and what we do is roll forward procedures, meaning what can we do that's light work to just verify that some of these controls haven't changed. The auditors some of them are going back and saying, asking about it or inspecting isn't quite enough. We might have to do reperformance or more poking of your Q4 samples. Statements of cash flow. So this one our clients were seeing in 2015, and in 2016 the auditors are going to expect it to be part of your normal process. So if you haven't made that change, you want to make sure it's in this year. Ensuring that the controls that over statement of cash flows, there are controls over it because it's typically not system generated, right? It's that Excel spreadsheet that we have that says beginning balance, ending balance. We do the change, the indirect method, the change, and then in between the change, especially when you have financing activities, you have other ins and outs, it's all manual, and it's all based on our knowledge of the activities in the organization or this past year. And so there's been enhanced focus on it from the SEC and from the PCAOB. So ensure that with that enhanced focus, want to make sure that this year it's included in one of our management review controls and it's documented. So here are the types of things you want to consider around those controls. 3 buckets around information, people, and the timing. So let's talk about information for the statement of cash flows. How are you collecting the financial data necessary to prepare the cash flows? What processes are in place to ensure the information is complete when you actually gather it? What about new and non-recurring transactions? How do you get how does finance get notified of these types of transactions? And what about other manual processes that are ad hoc? Could some of them be standardized? Could some of them be automated to save you some time in the future? So that's around information. Besides the information that you need for the statement of cash flows, you have to consider the people. The people preparing the financials or the cash flows, do they understand the principles of it? And this is highlighted in topic 230. Are there ways that you can help them by providing them better tools or training to do their job? And maybe the person preparing the statement of cash flow is really well trained, but the person reviewing the statement of cash flows, do they have enough expertise to identify where some of the misstatements might happen? Or sometimes are they high enough in the organization so that they know about transactions, particularly in ad hoc transactions, financing transactions, M&As, when you're acquiring certain companies? Well, how do you suss out some of those transactions? Because in the investing versus financing, is there enough information there so that you can have complete and full disclosure in the statement of cash flows? And then the timing. Do you have procedures so that as events are happening, as transactions are happening, you're providing the finance team with that information instead of waiting until the end of the quarter, end of the year, when we're all running around and we're all so busy, a transaction might slip through, or disclosures about that transaction, it's hard to find the support for that transaction now. Related party disclosures. Again, this was something that was hot and heavy in 2015. It continues to be so in 2016. So if you haven't put in controls around that, this is a good time to make sure planning, start of the year is a good time to do that. The new disclosures are required around related parties. So you want to make sure you have controls around related parties, transactions, and appropriate disclosures. The new PCAOB standard also requires additional audit procedures for the auditors. And we know that as soon as the auditors have additional procedures, it impacts us. So it's around identifying the complete population of the significant and unusual business transactions. What's the business purpose of those transactions? And also getting an understanding way up front in the risk assessment process, and understanding of the financial relationships and transactions between executive officers, even reading their employment and their compensation contracts, making sure that, hey, are there relationships between the officers and other companies that they're involved in, relatives, and other things of that sort that might need to be disclosed. And also, the auditors have then been asking for a list of transactions of all related parties during the quarterly review process. And it's helping them to understand. And so they're going to ask you, how do you know the list is complete? How do you know the list is accurate? So you want to think about it and do it now. And these controls have typically been part of the process in previous years, but now we're going to need to call them out and call them key controls in 2016. So the best practice that we can think of as we now summarize all of these activities is communication. Having kickoff meetings with your SOX provider or your SOX team, your internal audit team, and the management team, and proactively discussing some of these topics. The frequency of communication and the channel. Hey, every 2 weeks, do we get in a room together? Do we send out an email on the status updates? Do we just get on a call and make sure that this is what we're doing and are we aligned? Expected changes in the testing procedures. One of the things that happened to us was we had a client who, we've had them now for 5 or 6 years, and December, I get this urgent email that says, hey, we need to talk. Something has happened. And it turns out that it was a slightly different way that the auditors were approaching it, and also the way the sample sizes, the events were happening. A lot of the samples or the activities happened from Q1 to Q3, and then in Q4, as the auditors were coming and trying to find transactions for Q4, they weren't able to find enough samples. And it was just, let's talk about it early up front with your auditors. particularly your IT auditors. That's where I find a lot of disconnect, because on the audit firms, they're two separate teams, and oftentimes the finance audit side is very much aligned and working together, and then the IT team, maybe they weren't involved in some of these conversations, so they may be doing something that they're supposed to do, but they didn't realize, oh, for this company, it's not relevant this year, not applicable, skip it. Also, updates in terms of control language, control changes, communicating it to your auditors so that they can change their test procedures, or vice versa, that your SOX auditors need to change that as well. Areas of enhanced focus. That's where, talking to the external auditors, where are you going to be focusing on this year? And that's why we've brought this list of trends for you, so that it's a memory jogger. You can look through it and say, okay, what's jogging my memory that I should ask about? Timelines and deadlines, very critical. Sharing the timelines up front. Typically, for a lot of our clients, this is the time that we've put together the entire timeline for the rest of the year, and we share it with the auditors to make sure that they're aligned, and they also put staffing in place to match us, and proactively, when issues come up, we can then work through them, resolve them, and year-end is not a rush job with lots of headaches. Audit committee involvement, making sure that on our timelines we build in when the audit committee meetings are happening, and then we back it up, because we have to send the client, and we have to send materials to the audit committee about a week before the meeting happens, which means that 2 weeks before the audit committee meeting, we're starting to pull and summarize this information so that there aren't any surprises, and sending it out to the audit committee. And expectations with the clients, with the auditors, including IT auditors. I mentioned this, making sure that we communicate. And finally, around understanding the sources of data. That's quite a bit around systems that we discussed before, whether it's key reports, whether it's systems where data is being pulled for all areas, and the testing around that. So, I hope that this session was helpful, and I look forward to sharing more insights and the things that we are encountering on the battlefield as it's happening with you, real-time practical tips and developments. Have a great day.